Okay, Shalom Aleichem everybody. Today we're up to Daf Lamed Tes, but unfortunately, or fortunately, we got up to Lamed Ches Lamed Beis by the center of Tanu Rabbanan, two lines from the wide lines. Tanu Rabbanan. Start brisa like this. Hakafrisin, the husks that cover berries, the hakaflutos, leeks, the hemtelia and hemtelia. What is hemtelia? Gemara is going to explain it soon. V'achamin and hot water, v'akloyas and parched foods, foods that you roast in the oven, it becomes very dry, right? Anything that the goy, the ovet kechavim, cooked, any of these items, mutar and it's mutter. Why is it mutter? Pashtas, because it's edible raw, it's nechal chai kamois shehu, and we saw earlier in the Gemara that in order for a food to be subject to the Isra V'Shalakum, it's only if it's not nachal chai. That's one of the conditions. Beitzah tzluya, a roasted egg, asura. That's aser. Again, presumably because a roasted egg cannot be nachal chai. Shemen. What about oil? Oil of avdei kechavim. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi beis dino nimnu ola v'tiru. They're materit. So now the Gemara is going to explain what Amtalya is. Tanya, he Amtalya, he psilya, he shiasa. Gemara's Ksmai Shiasa, very nice. You translated a couple of times, different words, but what's the final translation? What does Shiasa mean? Says the Gemara, what is Shiasa? Amar Rabba, Babarchana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Harbon Shnin de Nofik Hai, Uvdam in Mitzrayim. It's already 40 years since the story came out of Mitzrayim. But Rabba Babarchana Didei Amar Hashitin Shnin de Nofik Hai, Mitzrayim. It's 60 years. And V'loi Pligim Mar B'Shnei and Mar B'Shnei. Each one is referring to the number of years that pass since he recounted, from the time he recounted a story since it happened until he recounted the story. But both are not arguing. It's just Rabbi Barchana recounted it 20 years later. And the Gemara now describes what the incident was, which translates the word Shiasa. What is it? Maisu bizra de karpasa. They brought seeds of cress, ubizra de kitna, and seeds of flax, bizra de shav lilta, and the seeds of fenugreek, v'taru l'ba'ad yadod b'pshure, and soaked them together in lukewarm water. V'shav klad l'makbel, left it there until it began to grow. Umayse chatz b'chadata, and he brought a new barrel. Amalu mai, filled it with water. V'tor b'gagishta, and soaked clay in the water. Umad b'kin bay, and the seeds, those three seeds, attached to the clay, and they brought it into the bathhouse, and people walked into the bathhouse. By the time they got out, it already sprouted, and they took some of the leaves, and it basically cooled them off from their head to their toes. So that's what Shiasa is. Shiasa is that growth. Those leaves that grow is Shiasa. Omer Rashi said, this is just words. It means nothing. This report is not true. You know why? Because it's impossible for that to grow into this shoot, this whole tree of leaves in such a short time, from the time you go into the bathhouse until you come out. Va'amri la b'milin. Others say, Rashi said, it must have been done with words abracadabra, right? Abore kedaberi. That's what it means, abracadabra. It's usually with words, right? Hashem created the world with words. Vayomer Elokim, Yehi. And Kishav taps into that koyach of being boirei with words. And this was done, Rashi says, b'milin al yedei divrei lacha shel kshaf meinoisin. It was done with words of Kishav. Ton Rabbanan hakuspan shel oivdei kechavim. Yeah, kuspan. What is kuspan? Rashi says, they are the sediments of the dates that you use it, pour hot water over it, and you make beer, date beer out of it. So if the hot water was boiled in a large pot, osri, can't take it from a goy. Mutter. Why? Because a large pot, you assume the goy cooked treif in it. A small pot probably couldn't fit treif in it, so mamela, you could assume it's kosher. There's no blias that went into the date beer. So how small does the pot have to be? As long as a dror bird is small and cannot enter inside the mouth of the pot. Now, this drawer bird, either it's a treif bird, right? It's treif, so if it could enter the mouth of the pot, then it would be aser. Or it's not a treif bird, it's a kosher bird which wasn't shechted, so it's nevela. But either way, it's a problem. So by Yorek Tana, since that bird, right, that's the smallest creature that would have been cooked in a pot by a guy, the smallest problematic creature, and since it can't fit in it, so and therefore it's mutter. Okay, whereas you're right, maybe it can't fit in whole, but maybe you chopped it up, and that's how you put it in. Anything that the head of a drawer cannot enter inside it, and I guess no piece is cut smaller than a head, so you don't have to be chayshish. Vatanya achas yoyer gedayla v'achas yoyer ketana mutter. Bryce says doesn't matter. Even yoyer gedayla is also mutter. Like kasha, hakam adam nestav gam osir, hakam adam nestav gam mutter. Right? The flavor that it imparts, that's extracted from the pot, is not very flavorable. It doesn't add a delicious flavor to the stew, to the beer. So Mamela, since it's a detriment to the mixture, right? It actually doesn't just not enhance the mixture, but it also ruins it a little bit. That's noisen tam livgam. So machlek is it's aser mutter. So if you hold it's mutter, then even if it's yer gedoyla, it's not a problem, right? Because even if you would have cooked something that's aser, but once it absorbs in the pot, whatever absorbed in the pot, afterwards extracted, it adsorbs into the food. It's not considered tam shel iser because tam livgam, and mamela it's not a problem. And the Bryce that says yer gedoyla is aser because all the yer noisen tam livgam is aser. Boiled oil of aramoi is aser. In other words, usually oil is mutter because we just said Yehuda nasi bezdinoi nimnu v'hitiru. But this oil of an aramoi, that's still aser. Gemara says why? What are we suspicious about? If you're afraid that he mixed in wine, which is yain nesach, and that's what should aser, Mr. Sorry. The guy would never do that. You know why? Because the wine ruins the oil. If because he cooked the oil, it's bishul akum, it's not a problem. Because it can be eaten even raw. So we said anything eaten raw is not subject to the isser of bishul akum. And if it's because it emits a flavor, right? Any flavor, any usser flavor from that pot that the guy had cooked with previously, devarim shel isser, we paskin nois tam lav gam or mutter. That's already nois tam lav gam. It should be mutter. So Miller of Safra argues and he says even oil of an aramoi is no problem and you can eat it. What about cooked dates of an aramoi? Sweet ones you don't have to worry about. The vadesharu, that's for sure mutter. Bitter ones, you don't have to worry about either. The vada asiri. That's all, it's for sure aser. Why is it for sure aser? Because it's not nechel kamei shucha. You can't eat it, right? We said anything that's not nechel kamei shucha is bishalakum. So if it's mamish bitter, the guy cooks it for you, right? Then it's a problem because he made it edible for you. What about dates that nishtaher nishtahin, as they say in Yiddish, right? You can't, technically you could eat it raw, but you don't usually do it. What's the shaila? The Rebbe Yosar. My Rebbe asered it. He considered it something as long as technically you could eat it chai, even though it's not so delicious, and you'd rather it cooked, still it's aser. It's not considered like a dover shenechel k'meishu chai. It's subject to the isser bishul akam. Emmanuel Levi. Who's my Rebbe? Levi. Gemara says, Shisa, what about shasisa? What is shasisa? So, shasisa is a food, it's a dish that's made from the flour of kernels that was roasted in an oven, of parched kernels. Now, depends what kind of kernels you use to make this shasisa, to include in the dish. With that flour, what kind of kernels you made the flour out of. If it's made of lentils, then lentil flour is very sweet. and kind of to balance the sweetness, you add vinegar. You like to soften the sweetness. Vinegar comes from wine, yain nesech, so it's a problem. From a goy, it's a problem. But if it's kernels from grain, from chita mesa'orim, then it's not a problem. So the Gemara says, bechita v'sar kul malpik deshari, right? Because it's not so sweet, so he doesn't add vinegar. Yeah, but lavcha dechala, but if it's lentils made from if it's lentils that is first Shisar, Rav Shari, Avodah Shmuel Levi Asri. Machlokes Rav and Avodah Shmuel whether it's mutter or asr. So Gemara says bechita v'sa'ari kulam lepligi deshari. Everybody agrees wheat and barley. It's no problem. It's mutter. Even Avodah Shmuel and Levi are matter because there's no chashash that he added vinegar. Betlavcha dechalam. If it's made of lentils, then kulam lepligi asr because he added vinegar and vinegar is wine and it's a problem. Keep ligi betlavcha demaya. Shasisa that's made of lentils, and he diluted it with water to soften the sweetness. Kimar savar gazin atoha. It's a gzeira that you can't even eat shasisa, a dish that's made with flours from kernels of lentils, because he adds water, even if it's added water, because he might add vinegar. That would be a problem. Gzeira. Mar savar legazrinan. V'kedamri betlavcha demaya kulam lapliga de aser. No, mayim is never a problem. Kiplik b'chita v'sa'ari. Mar savar gazin atoha. I'm sorry, mayim is for sure a problem by lentils. It's a whole different kernel. We're not geyser, no problem. Barzila Galad, he sent to David these two type of ceases. Nowadays, we're not choishish for this gzeira, v'les dechayish lahoda Shmuel, Avodah Shmuel v'Levi. Nobody's choishish for Avodah Shmuel and Levi. So the Gemara weiter. We learned the Mishnah Chavash Daklos Devechayayin. What about kvashin? Pickled foods. The custom is to put wine and vinegar in it. Omer Chizki l'shon shadarkan. It's also to eat. Only if the derech is to do it. Aval b'yadua. But if you know for sure that he added vinegar, then asar filo bana. That's also even bana. Maishna memorius. Why is it different than murius? The sharu rabbanon b'hana, that they are matered b'hana even if it contains wine. Gemara says asam la'abura zoama. Over there by Murius, even if it's known that you added wine, it's not a problem. It's muter b'hana. Why? Because the whole point is to remove unpleasant the unpleasant odor, the smell. So Mamela, if you're only adding the vinegar to remove some smell, that's okay. It's still muter b'hana. But when it comes to kvashin, that adds to the taste, to sweeten the taste, then it's a problem if you add wine. Even if it's known for sure that the guy added vinegar, it's also mutter to benefit from the pickled foods. Why by Murius? How's it different than Murius? According to Meir, it's Aser Bano. If he asers Murius, which is only to remove the unpleasant smell, he asers from Bano. Why would Reb Yochanan say by Kvashim it's mutter Bano? Gemara says no. It can be a chilik even according to Meir. Hasim yidiyam amashay, hachal yidiyam amashan. Over there by Murius, the wine becomes part of the food itself. Hagam, you only put it in to remove the unpleasant smell. But now that you put it in, it becomes part of the food itself, and that's where Meir asas ba'ana. But over here by kvashim, by pickled foods, it's there, it's soaking in it, right? It's pickling in the juice, but then when you take it out, it's absorbed, but it's not part of the food itself. It's not part of the essence of the food. Okay? So Meir, therefore, it's mutar ba'ana over here. That's according to Rabbi Yochanan. So the Heilige Gemara. We learned to the Mishnah, that it's mutter ba'ana. The Gemara says, "My chilak." What's chilak? It's a fish that's called sultanas, and it doesn't have fins and scales right away. It only develops the fins and scales after it matures. So why is it asur? Because when you catch it, a lot of times not kosher fish comes up together with it, and you might mix up the two and eat dog tame. What if it's only going to grow it later? It doesn't have fins and scales right now, it's only going to grow it later. Hareza mutter. That's mutter. You're allowed to eat it. Yesh la'achshav v'os lahashav shasha'olim anayam. What if it has right now, but it's going to shed once you take it out of the sea? Mutter. It's also mutter. Achas Rabbi Kesari. The Bevo announced in Kesaria. You're allowed to buy fats of a fish, the inner fats of a fish, and their eggs from any person. Because you can assume that any fish that's caught in Kesaria, that you catch in Kesaria, comes from Pisula and Aspamia, and since not kosher fish is not so common in those seas, you can assume it's kosher fish. Any tzachanta, which is a chilak fish, is also mutter if it's from the Bav River. Why? Because that river is known that it doesn't really contain not kosher fish. You can assume it's kosher. My timer, Gemara says, why taka don't those rivers have not kosher fish? Even if you say because the current is strong, it flows forcefully. Doesn't have a spine, but can't survive in such a place where waters flow forcefully. But we see that it does survive in strong currents. So that can't be the reason why the dak tameh, not kosher fish, aren't prevalent, aren't common in those seas. What are you going to say? It's because the rivers are salty. The high dak tameh, this not kosher fish, given the less like alpha, since it doesn't have scales to protect it, it can't survive in a place where the waters are salty. Yeah, but now we see it does survive in salty waters. It's because the Bav River is different because the silt doesn't promote the development of non-kosher fish. Yeah, the silt is like muddy waters. Yeah, it doesn't develop the growth of non-kosher fish. So the non-kosher fish are not common over there. Nowadays, the river of Goiza and Gamda flow into the Bav River. Assyria, you can't assume that it doesn't have not kosher fish anymore, yeah, and you can't buy it from a guy. This sea donkey is mutter. A sea ox is osir. Usually on land, right, it's the opposite. A chamor is osir, and the a shar, is mutter. But by yam, the sea animals, it's the opposite. Shfarnun is mutter, but Kedash Nun, what's called Kedash, is Aser, which is Kodesh Lashem. That's the simon, that's Aser. Called Kvar Nuna, fish that's called Kvar Nuna. Kvar Nuna is a simon that it's Aser, Kivra Avid Kchavim. Rekiva Ikla Ginzak came to Ginzak. He bought him a fish, they bought him a fish that was similar to a non-kosher Chipusha fish. Chapia B'Dikulam, he covered the fish with a basket, and now the fish thrashed about inside the basket, and it began rubbing its skin against the sides of the basket. He saw the skins, the thin scales on the walls of the basket was coming off, and it was this way he knew that it was mutter. Rav Ashi Ikla Tamduria. Rav Ashi visited a place called Tamduria. He brought him a fish that was similar to an eel, which is not kosher. So he held it against the sun. He saw that it had thin sprouts, meaning scales, and that's why he's matter it. Rav Ashi Ikla Asram. He came to a place called a certain place, and they brought him a fish that was similar to shfarnuna. So to make sure that it's taka kosher, he covered it with a white bowl to see the contrast, to see if it had scales. Taka saw that it had black scales against the white bowl, against the white surface, and was able to check it to see that it's taka kosher. Rabbi Chana came to a place called Akra the Agma, Krila Tzachanta. They brought him a Tzachanta fish, which is a kosher achilak fish, and he was about to be matur it. Shamlu Gavad Akarli Bate. He heard a person call it Bate, passed by Mamish as he was about to eat it. Ooh, I heard this person called Bate, probably his tummy. So he refrained from eating from it. And he realized that he was just saved. He took that message seriously. He heard a person call it bate as soon as he was about to eat from it. So he realized that, like the Nesiv Shalom says, Vayikra al Moshe v'daber Hashem Elav, that Vayikra is with a small aleph, which means Vayikar. Whatever happened to Moshe v'daber Hashem Elav, Hashem was speaking to him. So whatever happens to a person, it's a message. So the fact that this guy passed by and he called it bate. As soon as he was about to eat from it, Rabbi Yoel was about to eat from it, he said, probably a message, it's tummy. And he refrained from eating from it, and he was taka right. What's a grain of chiltus? What's the reason that a grain of chiltus cannot be eaten? Because the Oivd Chachamim cuts it with a knife. Even though we said is mutter, but because of the sharpness of the chiltus, I guess it revives that flavor. It sweetens the non-kosher fat flavor that's extracted from the knife. Now it's aser. He used to sell chiltus, and everybody trusted him. Why? Because they trusted him. He didn't buy it from a guy who cut it with a knife that had not kosher fats in it. Levi passed away. It's come to Rabbi Yoel, came to Rabbi Yoel. He still trust him or not? Even though Rabbi Levi passed away, still, since he was an Evet Shel Chaver, he got used to the halachas, to the chumras of Rabbi Levi, could trust him that he's not buying it from a guy, and he could buy the chiltas from him. He used to buy tchelis from the wife of Avram Chasida. Now tchelis, kosher tchelis comes from chelazon fish. It only comes once every 70 years. Very, very rare, very expensive. There are tchelis, other tchelis come from a plant. And it comes from a plant, that is more common, but it's not kosher. So some people, indigo plant it's called, some people will fool customers and take the indigo plant and present it as if it's tchelis from chilazon and make money. So he used to buy it from the wife of Ram Chasida, also come by Rav Yosef, le'avid biyodeh. So Poga Bechanan Chayoto. He didn't know the answer. So Mad Chanan, the tailor, Amralei, Yosef Anya Manole. From where would Yosef have an answer? But yeah, but I had such a story. There's Vinat Cheltam Ajbis the Rav Noach Chud Rav Chibar Abba. Baslo Kamed Rav Masna came from Rav Masna. Lahavat Biyode didn't know the answer. So Kamed Rav Yidim Agrain Yom and Nafalt Liyadi. Oh, Hachem Shmuel Eishes Chaver Chaver. You could trust her. Beseder. The Gemara, the Tanu Rabbanon, Eishes Chaver Chaver. A wife of a Chaver is like a Chaver. Abdesh Chaver 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 Shemeis. Ishtoyabon of Nevis and Engels goes. That she has the innocent proven guilty. Chena Chatz Shemech Bat Chelis. Harei B'Chaskasa Achti Pasel. Until you come across an incident where they tried to lie, then that ruins their reputation, their credibility. What about an Eishtam Aretz? She was married to an Aretz, but now she's married to a Chaver. They have to formally accept Divrei Chaverus. Rashi says, they have to accept on themselves that they're going to eat Chulam B'Tahara, they're going to Ma'aser Peiros, and whatever a Chaver does, they have to accept in front of 3 people. It's a mission, I think, in Pei or Demai, the process and how to be Mekabel Divrei Chaverus. What if she's married to a Chaver and now she gets married to a Ma'aretz? It's the other way around. She was the daughter of a Talmud Chacham and now she marries a Ma'aretz. Her Eved, who was prior owned to by a Chaver, now he's sold to a Ma'aretz. You don't have to Mekabel because they're used to keeping the halachos already. They're trained, so you don't have to Mekabel. They also have to Mekabel Divrei Chaverus L'Katchila. Basically, a wife, she molds herself around her husband. So even if she's married to a chaver and she's mamish kesheres like tefillin al yodai, right? She wraps the tefillin around them. She helps them do mitzvahs. Whole conversation in the Rishonim whether you're allowed to wrap tefillin around somebody, okay? Especially a woman who's not mechuyev in tefillin. Okay, it's a separate conversation. But either way, she's mamish makban al halachas, and then she marries a moiches, and what does she do? She's moiches. She's kaisher kishem moiches al yodai. The nature of woman is to mold herself around her husband. So mainly she can't be trusted, even though she was married to Talmud Chacham prior to being married to Amaretz. Oh, Merav, Chovius, Osir b'choisim echad. Oh, a Chovius. Chovius is an acronym for 4 different items. Is Osir if it just has 1 seal. Champak mut b'choisim echad. Okay, what is Chovius? Cholav basi yain tchelis, right? Milk, meat, wine, and tchelis. Then Asur b'choisim echad. If it's 1 seal, we're afraid that the guy chappered with it and it's not what the guy sent you. Chiltas muris pas gvina. What is A chempeg is chiltas muris pas gvina mutorin b'choisem echad. That's mutter. Mar's going to explain why. Why is one seal enough by these 4 items? Pas la menechashla imishmachlufei. If you say you need 2 seals by a pas, because you might exchange it. I guess you sent them fresh. You might exchange it with old. Gemara says no. He's not going to do that. Kriir b'chamim made the idea because he'll know. Everybody knows the difference between cold bread and warm bread. The chida b'sar nami made the idea. If he says, "I sent you wheat, wet bread from wheat," and he wants to switch it for a cheaper bread to take the more expensive bread, then people are going to know also. Iki adodi. And if they're the same, so if it's one seal, again, if it's the same, he's not going to triach himself, trouble himself to forge another seal and take what the guy sent you. According to Rav, who says that cholov is aser b'chaysim echad, why is cholov different than gvina? Yeah? Replace the word cholov. You have to. The ches is not for cholov because taka cholov is included in gvina and it's mutter b'chaysim echad. So what's the ches? Chatichas dog she'ein b'simen. Gemara says hainu basar. Wow, chatichas dog is the same as basar, right? Chavius, that's already included in basar. Of course, there's 3 gavna basar. It's 2 types of basar. Shmuel says he has this halacha from Shmuel differently. He says the bias asam b'chaysim echad. Right? That's the acronym. The manik is bias. Machag mutar b'chaysim echad. What's bias? Basi yain tchel esrim b'chaysim echad. Murias chilas gvina mutar b'chaysim echad. Okay. The Shmuel chatichas dak shein b'simen hayna basar. It's basar tagav and basar le'amrina because he says he doesn't mention the ches in the chavius like Rav. He says the ches is included in a basar because anyways chatichas dag. There's 2 types of basar, so maybe let's include it in that. You can't buy items. The items Yamach and Machag from Yidden who sell these items in Syria. Yeah. Lo yayin v'lo muris v'lo cholav. Yamach stands for yayin, muris, and cholav. V'lo melech sal kundris v'lo chiltas v'lo gvina. And Machag stands for melech sal kundris chiltas gvina. Elo min amumcha. By the way, you can't buy it from them. Why not? Because they are suspicious of lifnei iver l'sitan mechshol. They're not makbar on lifnei iver. So we're afraid they actually bought it from a goy and selling it to a yid. Elam and a mumcha, except from one who's a mumcha, the kulan, because he'll know the difference. He'll know the difference. Not because he'll know the difference, because he doesn't want to be caught and ruin his reputation. That's what they explain. For kulon im nasarech itzel balabayas mutter. If you go to his house, then it's mutter. Why? Because they're only suspicious of lifnei iver. But if in their own house, they're not going to be over on these isurim, they feed their family kosher like atchila mahadrim and mahadrin with the badatz aida charaitis. Masiyah lev shimon lev dum shimon levi shigur loy balabayas lebeisoi mutter. Yeah, it's a right of Shimon Levi that if he sent it to his house from one house to the next, it's mutter. My timer, balabayas l'shavak eteri v'achal l'sura v'chimeshagel my doachal mashader lei. Yeah, Balabaya sends him, he's careful in his own house, and he sends him from his own house, from his own pantry, from his own pots. That's okay. Melach sal kundris, my melach sal kundris, of Rabbi Shmuel, melach shekol sal kundri roimi oichlan oisam. It's salt that all the bakers of Rome eat. That's melach sal kundris. Yeah? You can't eat melach sal kundris. Why? Because this is the type of salt that kol sal kundrei roimi oichlan oisam. And what do? They mix non-kosher fat in those large blocks of salt. Ton Rabbanon, melach sal kundris shchoira asura levana muteres. They've made. Ruda oimer levana asura shchoira muteres. They're both asur. Why is only white salt asur? Because they smear it with non-kosher fats from whitefish. The Ram is shchayda asura. Why is it only shchayda? Because they smear it with kirvudok and shchayda tmeim uravam ba. The Rambam was also they shmeared with both. There was this old man in our neighborhood. He would coat the surface of the salkudra salt with fat of chazir. Okay. Mishnah concludes and sums it all up and says all these items are asur ba'achila, but not asur ba'no. Gemara says when the Mishnah sums it up and says Harei lo asurim lamutamai, what is it coming to exclude? Gemara says two pshatim. If taka, you know for sure that the goy mixed in foods that are asur, then for sure it's asur ba'no. It's only mutter ba'no if you don't know for sure. It's darkon, but it's not yedua. But if it's yedua avado, it's asur according to Chizkiah. Rabbi Yochanan lamiuta murias gvinas beis onyaki. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it's mamayit murias and gvinas beis onyaki. And Ustama kereb Meir. And this Mishnah is like Reb Meir that holds that these two foods are asur even ba'ano. So the Gemara says, the Mishnah is saying, only these are mutter ba'ano, but except harei elu, but except muris and gvuz besonyaki, according to Reb Meir, it's even asur ba'ano. Okay. Let's see if we can get to the bottom of the Amud. Says the Gemara, says the Heilige Mishnah, elu mutarin ba'achila. So far, the Mishnah, the previous Mishnah said it's mutter ba'achila, it's asur ba'achila, mutter ba'ano. Now the Mishnah is going to enumerate items that are even mutter b'achila. Ve'elu mutter b'achila. Cholav shechalova yitchav Yisrael re'eyu. If you have milk that's being milked by a guy and a yid could see him, it's mutter b'achila. V'advash and honey, v'adavdavoniyos and grape classes alpisham anatfin, even though they're dripping, ein b'mishim echsher mashka. It doesn't prepare the food to become tamei. Usually, in order for food to become tamei, it has to become wet or moist. From one of the seven mashkim, yat shachadam, yayin, dvash, shemen, cholav, tal, dam, and mayim. And here, even though it's getting wet or moist from the juice of the grapes, which could be considered like yayin, is no hechsher mashkim. And we'll see why not. Why takanat? Pashtus, because he wants to eat the grapes. He doesn't want it to come out of the grapes, to be extracted from the grapes and make the grapes sweat. And the halacha is by hechsher mashke that it has to be l'rotzen abaylam, and it's not l'rotzen abaylam. See the Gemara. Chavoshim she'ein dark los l'tachin yain v'chaymitz, and pickled stuff that the derech is not to put vinegar or wine. V'tar she'ein etrufa tzisher yesh bedogo, yeah. V'olah shel chiltes v'zeisik l'skoisam v'golgolin. Those are all mutter ba'achila. There's no chashash that the guy tampered with it or mixed anything into it. Rabbi Yossi Omer hashlochin asurin, that those with pits that are ready to fall out, those are asur. Yeah, Gemara was going to explain. Yeah, and Gemara says, the Mishnah says, "Chagov ma'abom minaslul asurin." Grasshoppers that come from the shopkeeper's basket are asur. But if it comes in the storage area, it's mutter v'chein l'truma. The same applies to truma. So the Gemara, Tanin lo the Taner Rabbanan. We saw also in a brisa similar to what the Mishnah says. Yisrael Yoshev Yisrael b'tzad edish lo v'cham v'cham lo maybe lo. A guy who is milking a cow, let's just say, and the Yisrael is sitting on the side over there by the side of the flock, and the guy brings him a glass of milk that he just milked from a cow. He doesn't have to be concerned that he mixed anything not kosher into it. Either like a if there's no not kosher animal in the herd, you don't have to be chayshish. Why should you be suspicious? If there's a not kosher animal in the herd, why is it mutter? Really, there is a davar tam. If he stands up, he can see what he does, and if he's sitting, he can't see what he does. I would have thought, since when he's sitting, he can't see him. So maybe he's doing his tampering with the milk, he's mixing in a davar tamei when he's not seeing. Kamash malan, given the chikoy chazulei, since he could stand up at any moment, and if he stands up, he can see what he does. He's afraid, and he's not going to mix in any not kosher milk. Says the Gemara of Dvash, Lamai Necheshlo. What's the problem with Dvash? Yeah, Gemara says, no problem with Dvash, you can eat it. If you're choishes, you mixed wine into it, Mr. Sorry, wine would spoil it. So he's not going to mix wine into the dvash. There's no problem because he can eat it raw. If it's because of because it's going to extract the flavor, the not kosher flavor from the pot, and make it osir, not osir either. Because that flavor that is extracted from the pot is to the detriment of the food, right? It doesn't enhance the food, and that's would still be mutter. So mamela dvash of an ovid kechavim is always mutter, no problem. It's mutter b'achila. Says the Gemara v'adav devoniyos af b'shem menatves ein b'shem echsher mashka. There's no problem of hechsher mashka. Vermini asks the Gemara, haboitzer lagas. Somebody harvests grapes for the wine press. Shama omer hochshar, right, and gets wet in the basket. Yeah, he's harvesting, putting in the basket to take it to the wine press. So even if some of the liquid came out in the basket, then it's machshir the grapes to makabel toma. Hillel omer lo hochshar. No, it doesn't. It's not machshir it, right? And in the end, v'oidel Hillel l'shamai, Hillel was moeded to Shammai. So you see that according even to Hillel, it's machshir l'kabel toma. So how could the Mishnah say it's not machshir it? Says the Gemara, no, it's different. Over there it says aboitzer legas, meaning you're taking it to the wine press. You want it to become juice. So as soon as the juice comes out, even when it's still in the basket, it's l'rotzna bailam. You want it, and therefore it's a problem. Here he wants to eat it. It doesn't say aboitzer legas. So amela, if juice comes out of it, it's shaloi l'rotzna bailam, and it doesn't have the criteria necessary for it to be machshel kabel tumah. Because in order for any of those 7 liquids to be machshel kabel tumah, it has to be to the satisfaction of the bailam, and in this case, it's not to the satisfaction of the bailam. Okay, we'll stop over here. Mitzvah Hashem, we'll go to 40 tomorrow.